Just get down, Jesus. Um, yeah, there's a pretty good bit. There's a pretty good bit in Colorado.
Yeah.
Also, speaking of, so throwing it back a la challengers,
Okay.
before I got on here, I was looking at U.S. Open tickets because that's like the one thing I want to do this year is go to the U.S. Open in New York.
Mm.
And I have an Amex, so I get buy one get one free tickets for certain
Okay.
sessions. So I'm trying to make it happen.
How
So
much
I'll
do
let
they
you know
look?
if I see Zendaya while I'm there.
Oh shit. Well, how much do they go for? Like, how much is a U.S. Open ticket?
So the early sessions are not expensive. I get buy one get one free for the quarterfinals and some
Mm.
other sessions, but I'd really like to buy. Um, I want to do the women's final. The women's final is more expensive. I think it's around like 500, but I think it would be so sick to be there just to be a final match.
Yeah.
I would do the men's, but they're like double the price, obviously.
Yeah, I can imagine, right? But no, that environment itself has got to be something definitely worth experiencing. I haven't watched the Netflix series. Is there two Netflix series on tennis? Like,
Yeah, so there's two seasons. It's called
right.
Breakpoint, and
I think
there's
I watched the first one.
the
I think I
second
did.
season's not very good, but the first season's really good.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Old tennis
Um,
fascia
yeah, exactly.
aficionado over there, right?
Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. It's Blake and Anthony. This is Totally Biased Music, and today we are going to be talking about Nirvana's Unplugged album. And I did not see if there's an Apple Music intro, so give me just a second here while I
Yeah.
try to pull it up. Because if there is, I would like to have it because it's hard to put into words this album in particular.
Yeah.
But it doesn't look like they had. Wait, hang on. Let's see. Oh, here we go. It's worth remembering and repeating Unplugged was never meant to be Nirvana's final statement. Recorded in New York on November 18th, 1993, 5 months before Kurt Cobain's death, it was the first of three tapings in 3 days that week for MTV. Quote, I think the next day we did Stone Temple Pilots, series producer Alex Coletti tells Apple Music, quote, and Tony Bennett the day after that. Almost immediately after the band had finished, the production crew was tearing the set down, including the black candles and white stargazer lilies that would later give viewers the feeling that they were watching a live funeral. Quote, it should all still be sitting there, Coletti says of the set. It should be preserved in glass, but we didn't know at the time and we moved on. So with that being said, I think I've talked about it before. Nirvana, one of my favorite bands of all time, if not my favorite band of all time, still to this day. This album, very emotional, very intense, great music, some of their best work, and there's a lot of interesting factoids and stories behind this. The song selection is really interesting. There's a lot of covers in there, so it was great to go back and listen to it and get a little emotional, thinking about what could have been for the future Kurt and how it was for him at the time. But what did you think, Anthony? Had you heard it before? Did you listen to it front to back?
I listened to it all the way through. I actually own the DVD, and it was funny because I was watching it on the DVD, and maybe it was just the disk drive on my PC that it was a little off, like as far as like vocals to action, like it was just off a minor, like a millisecond, enough to where I could notice it. So I went back and watched it all on YouTube, so it's all out there for people
Yeah,
to see. Yeah, I think I'd actually have bought this vinyl for a girlfriend in the past too. So like I'm very familiar with this album, very familiar with Nirvana in general. Big Nirvana fan, but they're not my go-to grunge band. We did Alice in Chains Unplugged probably a couple months ago, Christian and I,
yep,
and I resonate more with Alice in Chains from a grunge standpoint, but a ton of respect for Nirvana and Kurt and Kristen, Dave, as far as like their musicianship. But this is an interesting watch. It's been a while since I've actually watched them perform this. Um, but I have a lot of thoughts on it. Good, and then a lot of like questioning thoughts too. But it's interesting, so I'm excited to go deep down this rabbit hole of Nirvana in a situation that I mean, the Apple Music intro says it right. As far as like this album was recorded in I don't know, the winter of '93. Kurt passes away in like the spring of '94, and then this album gets released publicly in the fall of '94. So it was like this weird chain of events that happened, but the public they get Kurt's death and then they get this, right? Which is like
right.
it is kind of like a funeral, but it is almost like a shining light as to the diversity of how they can perform their music, right?
Yeah.
So it's really intriguing from a lot of different angles. So
Yeah, and Unplugged as a series, I think, is really cool. And I think in particular for bands like Audio Slave, Alice in Chains, Nirvana, it's cool to see them showcase how they do Unplugged, right? Because you wouldn't expect that type of music to roll over well into an acoustic setting. And you can hear it here, like the instrumentation is really different, and Kurt's vocals really, really shine throughout the whole thing. He's so emotional. You can hear that emotion in his voice. And I just thought it was great then and still is great now. You know, it just never loses its impact. But what kind of questions did you have? Some intriguing thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, song selection's a big one. You know, I mean, there's of course a lot of known songs on this album. There's a lot of, you know, maybe you could say B-side Nirvana tracks on here, as far as like About a Girl Coming from Bleach, and even like Dumb or On a Plane, right? Versus songs that aren't on here, Heart Shaped Box, Lithium, In Bloom, Smells Like Teen Spirit. Like the bangers aren't on here. And I think there's even points within this performance that Kurt, the banter in this album is very interesting. And I think it's very telling of Kurt's lack of being comfortable in this setting. You know, I think that there's a lot of him just kind of rambling, and even like there's banter with the crowd. But there's one, like somebody in the crowd recommend, or, you know, shouting out like in Bloom, like play In Bloom. And Kurt, you know, says like, how would you even play In Bloom in acoustic? And it's an interesting angle, because Kurt is also playing through an amplifier on this. And it's like one of the, I'm not super fluid on all the MTV Unplugs, but I know that it's a one-off because of that. Like, I don't think that other people have done that, made that adjustment. I think that was something to help him overcome that insecurity of performing something acoustically, to say, just let me plug in. And I think I read it somewhere that he had mentioned that. But I found that to be really interesting as far as from a song selection standpoint. I know they have a lot of Meat Puppet songs on here, and then they have some musicians play with them too. But I think you're spot on with the interpretation of like this. I think this album is a showcase of Kurt's vocals, and Kurt's vocals are so specific to him. And I find myself thinking too, had Kurt not passed away so early, would he adapt over time his voice, right? Because the straining singing that Kurt does is so iconic, but it's also not, like, from a longevity standpoint, it doesn't add up in that sense. Like, it's not ideal for performing over years of time. So I find it really interesting to think about how would he perform after playing with Nirvana for, let's just say, 10 years, you know? I mean, like, that's a long time. But other things that I found interesting, you know, Kurt struggled with pain a lot throughout, at least through the later half of his years. And I just find it so refreshing to see him spinning in a swivel chair. Like he's in like a desk chair. Like there's nothing special about him. He's not sitting on a stool, but he is on like a little office chair, and he's swiveling around talking to the different musicians. I found that really funny. And you know, I mean, that being kind of the gist of it. I don't want to give any more out, because I'll go into the tracks in a second, and I'll pull out some more kind of things that I noticed throughout the performance itself. But yeah, just interesting. I mean, like, we use that word a lot, I think, throughout the podcast, but it's hard to put to words something like this, right? Because it is so not. Nirvana to me is energy. It is very impactful, like from a physical release kind of standpoint, right? But this is the total opposite. This is very serene, very melodic, very hypnotic, and very daunting too. I think the stage setup is ideal for what it does become, because it is kind of like a send off for Nirvana in a way. And there's even a line in the first cover they do, Jesus doesn't want me for a sunbeam, that track. There's a line in there towards the end of the track that Kurt is singing, "Don't expect me to die." which is just like, whoa. And you
Yeah,
look at it
it's
through that
heavy to
lens.
think about.
Yeah. And then think about like the fans in 94 who are seeing this for the first time. Kurt's already passed away and he's doing a cover and he's saying those lines. It's just like fucking, you can't
Yeah,
make it
it's
up,
heavy as
right?
shit.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
exactly.
I think like back to your point about him being uncomfortable. I don't think Kurt was really ever comfortable
Right.
playing live music. Like he
Yeah.
never really spoke positively about it. And Kurt was very much like when I was a kid, I read the biography or the autobiography or biography, I can't remember which one, that Montage of Heck is based off of, the documentary. And I haven't
Mhm.
watched Montage of Heck because Carly told me it's really sad and fucked up and I don't want to watch it. But
You
I
should.
I read the biography and it has his handwritten notes and it has like his drawings and stuff. And Kurt's a weird guy, man. Like
Yeah.
he was a weird guy from the time he was a kid. He just had all these thoughts and these strange things in his head that he couldn't find a way to get out. And Nirvana was kind of that release for that. But he was an introvert and he was shy.
Yeah.
And I think like Nirvana reaching the level of fame that they reached in such a short period of time was probably tough for him to deal with. And I know that,
1,000%.
Dave and Chris have talked about how how he carried himself and how he struggled with those things kind of weighed on them heavily, right? Like he was a wreck emotionally. And I think that fame had a lot to do with it. And what's interesting is I don't know if they're still on Netflix, but CNN had those series, like they had a 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s series, and they broke down like different episodes, talks about different cultural events, right? Like music, politics, things like that. The 90s one, the music one, they talk about Nirvana and they talk about grunge music as a whole, but they show kind of the public's perception of Kurt's death. And it's like heartbreaking to see. It's all that you can just see, like this outpouring of just depression and sadness from people that really, really felt close to him. And a lot of them were like teenage kids at the time, like kids in
Yeah.
high school. Like they were showing kids that were like leaving high school, like they were leaving their classes and going and basically mourning on the lawn of their high schools because they had lost somebody that they felt like a real connection to. And I think a lot of the ways that you and I view and a lot of people have viewed Kid Cudi is a lot how kind of Kurt was for those kids at the time, right? Like rock music in the 80s wasn't this type of emotional kind of self-loathing deprecation music that really gets into like heavy hitting themes, and I think they resonated with that because they hadn't heard it before, right? And
Right.
not to this, not to say that there was an artist like that before, but Nirvana kind of took that to new heights, and along with bringing a new genre or making a genre explode in a way that it hadn't before. And I think that has a lot to do with the song selection, right? Like that he wanted songs that were emotional to him, and we'll get into more of those later. But the track selection is very interesting, and I grapple with it. Sometimes I really like it, and sometimes I'm like, man, I wish I could have heard,
Right.
In Bloom or anything like that in
Yeah.
an acoustic setting. But I think there was a vision to it that he was determined to fulfill, and it worked.
Right. Yeah. I think too, just on that point of like Kurt Kurt was a voice to a generation that was growing, that was starting to find their own identity, right? Because I mean, if you think of just like punk rock in this time period or grunge rock in this time period, it is a bunch of outcasts and misfits who really don't have that home. But when they see somebody like Kurt and the band like Nirvana performing like they do in full on in the public eye. I mean, this was the boom of MTV as well, right? So like they're playing Smells Like Teen Spirit nonstop and it's resonating with a generation. And to have that almost pulled out from under you because they're well, I guess I can't say for certain, but like I can only imagine that the fan base was not as aware of Kurt's insecurities and of Kurt's, struggles with addiction, or maybe to a point, right? Or they could probably
Yeah,
assume a lot of it, but like in reality, once you start digging into the stuff that he was struggling with, it is tragic, and it's tragic that he kept it to himself in a sense of like not being able to get help or relief from another outlet. But
yeah,
but I think he does it he as a figurehead in music speaks volumes to generations of the past and generations to come because the fact that he did pass away prematurely now I think elevates him to another level of stardom because there's not going to be any controversy of him anymore. He was I mean, his life is pretty much open and shut to where
Yeah.
there's not a lot of nuances except for the fact of how he died, which I I don't know. Do you want to talk about that, or do you want to save that for something else? Like,
I mean, I understand that there are a lot of conspiracies about it. I watched Soaked in Bleach, which talked
yeah,
about it. I mean, to me, it has always seemed like people struggling to grasp the fact that they lost a generational artist to his own
yeah,
self-loathing. You know,
yeah,
that's what it seems like to me. Is it sad and tragic? Absolutely, but I don't see any other reason to believe that it wasn't anybody but himself. Kurt was a
yeah,
troubled individual, and anybody that reads anything about him or read a biography or listened to his music or watched a documentary on him will know that. You know, they will know that
right,
he's a lot more troubled than people realize. I think, like, even like I said, from the point of being a child, like, he had serious issues, and I think his fame heightened those issues, which is depressing. You know, it's really sad, but I don't believe there's any wrongdoing. I think Kurt was
yeah,
tired of living, unfortunately. You know.
yeah, yeah. I agree. You know, I mean, with his circle could I guess you could interpret his circle in a lot of different ways because he had his bandmates, he had other musicians that respected him, and then Courtney Love becoming an influence in his life too. But I think that the situation, all the struggles that Kurt dealt with, I think it is pretty clear the case of of suicide when it comes to him. But it is unfortunate, and I do think that people can't help but try to think that that wasn't the case, right? Again,
Yeah,
I
try
think
to
that's kind of the
rationalize it.
mythology. It's kind of the mythology of Kurt, trying to maybe not consciously trying to elevate him to any other status. I think it's just inevitable that there will be those thought patterns around him. But
Yeah. No, I
but
agree. Well, let's get into top tracks. What do you got for your top three?
so I'll start with number three. I got the last track on the album. Where did you sleep last night? It is such a bluesy track. It is like I wrote down here like this is like a train car song. Like I've had this vision of like somebody on a train in a train car, hobo style, playing this song and just
Yeah.
belting it out. And like Kurt delivers, and I think that this song being the last one that they perform for this concert, he lets it all out. Like he doesn't hold anything back. And again, like that speaks so much to how emotionally he does perform. But you can't do this night after night, right? But the
Yeah.
fact that he would do it speaks so much. But this one, I think is special and powerful. There's a line he says before the song. He's as the crowd is suggesting songs for the final track. He's like, "Fuck you all. This is the last song of the evening." I mean, like it's just, like
It's
he's
so
very.
funny, dude.
It's hilarious, and I think that's like such a thing that's not talked about enough is his when he is in these situations with the crowd. I mean, he's doing from an introverted standpoint, it feels like he's trying,
Yeah.
and I think that means so much to me, regardless of however else it can get interpreted. Like he's doing what he can, and then when you do start to kind of dig into all the shit he's struggling through, and then you realize, wow, he's still performing night after night while he's having like deathly illness happening inside. His stomach was a
Yeah.
wreck. Like it was,
Yeah.
it's pretty documented, but that track is really powerful. That's a song by the musician they said is Leadbelly. So I
Yeah.
think it's just an old blues uh, performer. I don't know
Yeah.
much about him. Um, second, number two track, I have Lake of Fire. Dude, this one, it's in that same vein of like just a powerful performance. I can't say enough about it. I've not heard, I don't think I've ever listened to the original of it. Have you?
No, I haven't listened to really any Meat Puppets, to be
Right.
honest.
But I think that it makes sense as to why, because this performance is what it is. Like I haven't listened to the original, but I'd be surprised if I did and thought of Lake of Fire in that sense versus
Yeah.
Kurt's rendition of it. Um, something throughout this performance too is like you I almost got this sense that Dave Grohl, the drummer, and he does play guitar throughout the performance, which I really appreciate. But it's such a simple. I think you could go back there and play drums for this performance, right? It's a very simple, like Nirvana's song structure, at least in this context, is very simple.
Well, in all their songs, really,
I
like
think
even
so.
their studio albums are
I
very
agree.
simplistic, you know.
I agree. So like that's why Nirvana I think sticks out in my mind from such an energetic performance standpoint. And they deliver an energetic, or I should say, an emotional performance in this context versus people out of their chairs thrashing to it.
Yeah.
But Lake of Fire is a powerful, powerful ass song. And then number one, I've got Something in the Way. This one, it is the how do I say this? It is the beat change is the heartbeat maybe of this performance. Like there's something in this point where Kurt's building his vocals throughout the track to just let it rinse again. It's like it's very up and down from a performance standpoint, but I love the way this song comes across. I love the way he's emotional within it. So it's definitely number one. But but after this track, I don't know. I doubt on Spotify it includes this, but definitely on YouTube it does, because there's like a 4-minute performance of the track itself, and then there's like 2 minutes of banter afterwards, where like they do Chris does a Sweet Home Alabama rendition throughout it, which is funny. They start talking about these old Davy and Goliath cartoons, like they just I don't know Kurt and
That's
Chris.
hilarious.
They're just talking while they're kind of trying to figure out what to do next, which I found interesting. And then they go into the Meat Puppets section, but yeah. And then I just wrote down, one of the Meat Puppets characters, or not characters, fucking musicians. The crowd yells "Freebird," and he's like, "I got a free bird for you right here." So, dude, there's so much outside of the music within this performance that you could just see that the musicians are out of their comfort zone, but they're doing their thing still in that context, which I appreciate so much. So,
well, it's funny when before he goes into Jesus doesn't want me for a sunbeam. When he goes to play at the end of Come As You Are, he's like, I guarantee you I'm going to fuck this next song up, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really funny.
Yeah. And like Lane Staley from the Alice in Chains Unplugged concert, there's a point in that concert where he does fuck up and he's like, shit. And they started over, so it's like it breaks down that like facade of musicianship to say like these are humans up there, and it's obviously very clear, but in reality it's like they're going to make mistakes, and their feelings are on display. Their subconscious is on display when Kurt's saying, I don't know what song we're going to do next, or we can't do that one because it's not an acoustic based track. Or, it's just like it's very open. They're very open, and which I find very refreshing.
Well, I will say I love Something in the Way. However, I did ruin that song for myself because Christian and I, especially Christian and I, when we were doing the pod, used to like do our own renditions on songs where we replaced words with like dick or penis or ass or something. So all I can think of is something in my ass instead of something in the way. Something in my ass. And so now that's all I can think of when I hear it because I'm a dumbass. But it's still a great song, But that's, we get together, we have a good time, we banter, it is what it is. I don't think Kurt would appreciate that. Maybe he would. I bet he would find it funny.
Yeah, he might have a couple different versions of these tracks, in his own frame of mind.
Yeah, so, exactly.
Shit, that's crazy.
Well, for me, so I'll go from 3 to 3 to 1. So number 3, Come As You Are. Come As You Are is a fucking classic, man. Like one of the most famous Nirvana songs. It's hard to pick a favorite off of Nevermind, but Come As You Are is great, and his vocals in this, you can hear that strain that he's putting on his vocals when he's singing, which, like you said, is not conducive of a long career, I think, singing wise. But like, God, he sounds so good, and it's such a good it's so much better acoustically. This is like the one song where I think it's better on this than it is on the actual studio album. Like, I think it was meant to be an acoustic song, or acoustic electric, I guess is how you would actually describe it. But I love Come As You Are. And then number 2, The Man Who Sold the World, man. I love this fucking song. And I'll be honest with you, like, I've because I've listened to this album so much and I love Kurt and Nirvana so much, like this is a Nirvana song to me. Like I have not
Yeah,
listened to the David Bowie version. I'm sure it's great, but like I know it's never gonna hold the place in my heart that
exactly.
the man that Nirvana's does. And it's a great song. David Bowie's a great writer, great lyricist, great musician, and I think their rendition of it is just really good. And I love that guitar. That guitar throughout is just it's so like you said, it's like hypnotic. It drags you into the song and kind of gets you wrapped in. And I don't know what their relationship was. I would be interested to find out. I know Kurt was very much on record, which I know now we think like this isn't a big deal, but in the '90s, Kurt had made statements like, "If you're homophobic, if you're racist, if you're sexist of any kind, like don't buy my fucking music, don't come to my fucking shows, like you're not welcome here." And I
Yeah.
think that we think it's not a big deal now, but in the '90s, especially, like I think tensions between like the gay community and everybody else in America was really at a height, and Kurt kind of took a hard stance on that, which I think speaks to his character. As fucked up as he was in the head, he was still a good guy. I think he just struggled.
I think he cared about people,
Yeah,
like he cared about everyone's general well-being. Like I don't think, I mean, I honestly can't think of like a cruel thing he did. At least that's like documented. But like in reality, there was so much going on within him that I think. I mean, it is such a like tell of how pain can just affect you, right? I mean, when you're
yeah,
living in pain 24/7, I mean, it takes its toll, right? And like it's something that you can only express to someone else how much pain you're in, and, and that's all you can do, right? You can't make them understand what you're going through. It's
yeah,
got to be an incredibly difficult position to be in. And then, yeah, you put a spotlight on him as far as like from a career standpoint. It's, yeah, I
yeah.
can only imagine.
And then number one, "Where Did You Sleep Last Night?"
Yep.
Best to me, best song on the album. Like I listened to this song religiously, and I don't know. I should have used this as my rides or dies. Do you know what Wizard is? Kid Cudi's project Wizard.
Mm-mm. I mean, I've
So
heard of
it's
it, but I'm not aware of the
so it's
details.
him with I think it might be Dot. I can't remember, but it's basically like it's like kind of rock
It's like
music
a
essentially.
production
Yeah, and so
concept.
there's some songs with no lyrics, but they cover "Where Did You Sleep Last Night." So I need to send that version to you because it's
Yeah.
really really good. But I think that this is the pinnacle of this album, dude. It is so good. His emotion is crazy. It's the perfect send off, right? Like it's the
Yeah, I agree.
perfect last track on the album, and Kurt screaming at the end, like the very last vocals in the song. He just belts out the last lyric, and it's
Mm.
so powerful, so good. And I love that song. I listen to both those versions, the Wizard version and Kurt's version, constantly. Even when I'm not listening to the whole album, I'll go in and play "Where Did You Sleep Last Night?" And I know Jordan's a huge fan of it, and he'll send me tracks off this album all the time. But "Where Did You Sleep Last Night?" just a staple, and I really love it. I think it just, like I said, with the song selection, like I think that's the perfect way to end this album, right? It's dark, but it's also just very interesting, a very nice like goodbye song. This is the last one, and it just hits with the theme of kind of everything they've been playing. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's just that's always going to be my top track. So that's where I'm at.
I feel that. I feel that. Yeah. Again, the blues, like it's Kurt singing blues, like that's a match. That's beautiful. Like those two together, I think will always make sense.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I feel that.
So a little bit tougher. Let's get into bottom
Yeah.
tracks. What do you
So
got?
as far as bottom tracks, there's I don't openly dislike any songs that are on this album. The thing that gets me is the lack of like Lithium and Heart Shaped Box are ideal tracks to be played acoustically. And there are acoustic versions out there that are amazing. And I just wish they were thrown in here somewhere. So I'll pick two tracks that I would replace with Heart Shaped Box and Lithium. One is Oh Me, one of the Meat Puppets tracks, which I
Yep.
think, yeah, I mean, the first Plateau is not bad. Omi kind of just seems like they're getting somewhere and they needed another Meat Puppet song, and it makes sense to be able to perform it. Lake of Fire, I have no arguments with. Obviously, it's in my top tracks, but Omi and Penny Royal Tea. I've never
Really?
resonated with that track that much. Maybe it's just because there's other Nirvana tracks that hit me harder, but it just didn't do it for me in this context. I like On a Plane. I like
Yeah.
Dumb and Polly. Even though, I think Kurt says something around after Dumb, before Polly, verbalizing that those songs sound so identical that we had to play them back to back,
Yeah.
which is just like he's very aware. He's very
Yeah.
aware of it. But again, I just the lack of like Lithium, I think, is my favorite Nirvana song, and I've heard it acoustically, and like this could have been that time to showcase it, but they showcase it in another outlet. I don't honestly don't know the details of where that song was recorded, but either way, I would take Penny Royalty out, Owe Me out, and throw in those two. So that's
That's fair.
how I can justify it.
That's fair. Yeah, for me, Jesus Doesn't Want Me for a Sunbeam. I don't know, man. Like, the thing about this song is I much way would have preferred to have Heart Shaped Box. Like, I think that fits way better. And I know he had a reason for doing what he did, but I don't know. Kurt's vocals, like, he's an artist where his vocals like they're unique and they're hit or miss in the sense that like sometimes I really enjoy them and sometimes I'm like I wish like I could hear the soothing sound of Chris Cornell,
Right.
his honey voice. And
Mm-hmm.
just Kurt's vocals on Jesus Don't Want Me as a Sunbeam, it's rough,
Yeah.
it's they're very like uncut, raw, and that's not a problem, but it's just something that I'm not always in the mood for. So I don't really love it. And then Oh Me, that I
Yeah.
agree. Oh Me, like out of the Meat Puppets covers, Plateau is great, Lake of Fire is great, and Oh Me is kind of just in there. It's
Right.
not bad, but it's not great like the other two are. So it's kind of just a weird placement. But it's not like when I listened to it all the way through, I listened to both the tracks. I didn't skip them or anything like that. I never would, but it's just I feel like you said, there could have been other songs that fit there better, I think.
Right. Right. Yeah, I get that.
Um, so let's get into. I want to talk about some album sales, and then I'll get into reviews and things like that. So, uh, it was released on the 1st of November 1994. It debuted at number one on the Billboard 200 and sold 310,000 copies, the highest first week sales in Nirvana's career. By March 1995, the album
Wow.
had outsold In Utero with 6.8 million copies. Obviously, received positive reviews from critics everywhere. So it was widely successful from a selling standpoint. MTV has it as or not, sorry, not MTV. Rolling Stone has it on their top 500 of all time, top 500 albums of all time. Where do you think it ranks?
It's up there.
I'll give you a hint. It's between 2 and 400. That's as
Yeah.
narrow
Okay.
as I'm going to
Right.
make
Yeah.
it.
Right. I mean, like, fuck,
200 and
because
400,
like,
somewhere in between there.
yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, I'll give it an easy like 69. Let's say 69.
It's 279 out
Okay.
of 500.
So like kind
So
of right in meats and guts of it, right in around
yeah,
the middle.
right in the
Gotcha.
middle. Yeah.
Yeah. I think Nirvana it's wild that you say that this was like the first week top selling album, something along those lines, like
Yeah.
best performance out of a first week of an album sale for them, because I think Nevermind coming out when it did and having the public outreach that they had at that time is a perfect storm for success, right? It's counterculture, it's a youthful generation, it's MTV, it's being broadcast through radio. Perfect storm for success. And then this album coming out after Kurt passing away, being an acoustic one-off kind of performance for them, is another like perfect storm for success. So like it's almost like Nirvana couldn't there's nothing they could have done to make themselves not be successful. It's just a
Yeah.
matter of what comes with success is so much baggage and so much expectation and so much of not what were seemingly about.
Yeah.
It's just like it's unfortunate because it's a catch-22. It's like a conundrum to say you want to perform this music in the way you want to do it, and you get to do that, but with that comes fucking rabid fans, nonstop, right? Or commercial opportunities and things like that, or Rolling Stone photo shoots. I think I wish I could know the story, but I think there's a story behind their Rolling Stones like cover shoot or something like that. Which
Yeah.
I mean, when you have Kurt, there's bound to be antics and things like
Yeah.
that. But
Of course.
I should look into that story. That'd be something for the fans to look up too.
So Rolling Stone also ranked the top 15 unplugged performances. Where do you think this landed?
Oh, of the top 15 of
Yeah.
their unplugs,
MT
unplugs
of MTV unplugs. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I think it's gonna be number one.
It is number one.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I wouldn't personally put it at number one. Read through that list because I just looked through. I was just curious to see if they're massive list, but 15 sounds more digestible.
So 15 Rod Stewart, 14 Kiss, 13 Oasis, 12 Paul McCartney, 11 Lauryn Hill, 10 Neil Young, 9 Alicia Keys, 8 Hole, 7 Mariah Carey, 6 LL Cool J, A Tribe Called Quest, De La Soul, 5 Eric Clapton, 4 Alice in Chains, 3 Jay-Z, 2 Pearl Jam, 1 Nirvana.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And they say Unplugged wasn't Nirvana's last concert. Just 1 week after it wrapped, they'd resume the American leg of In Utero tour and then head to Europe early in the following year for 2 months of additional shows. But in many ways, the show felt like their final statement to the world. The vibe was dark before they even walked on, since Kurt Cobain insisted that the stage looked like a funeral, complete with lilies and black candles. Joined by touring guitarist Pat Smear and cellist Laurie Goldstein, the group skipped over nearly all their obvious hits in favor for covers like David Bowie's The Man Who Sold the World, The Vaseline's Doesn't Want Me for a Sunbeam, and no less than 3 Meat Puppet songs, where they were joined by band leaders Chris and Kurt Kirkwood themselves. Near the beginning, Kurt delivered a chilling rendition of Come As You Are, repeating the line, "No, I don't have a gun," through gritted teeth, a moment that became very hard to watch in light of later events. The show wraps up with all apologies and a cover of Lead Belly's In the Pines, which they renamed Where Did You Sleep Last Night? It's hard to think of a more powerful double shot from any live concert in the entire 1990s or perhaps in the entire history of rock and roll. So, very interesting take. Yeah. And I think it is interesting, right? Like they skipped over so many hits, like to perform what they performed, and I think it's a cool statement on their part.
And I think they were touring with the Meat Puppets at that time too. So like it made sense that they're there and give them some spotlight too. It speaks to their musicianship, right? And just like camaraderie with other artists. It's like put them on display. So
they say in their overall review, Rolling Stones, and they don't give it a rating, but they say whatever demons were circling him, Kurt Cobain was in total control on a night that showed what his future could have been. So it's sad, man. It's sad to read. It kind of like I get choked up a little bit reading it, knowing that there could have been more.
And I didn't even take into account that I don't have a gun line. I get so lost in that song that like I'm not thinking about it in that context, but that review definitely put another asterisk on it. Like there's so much haunting vocals throughout this that you could definitely pull from it. The reality of Kurt's situation.
Yeah.
It's deep. Nirvana does go deep, even though like, on the front end, I think they are very much like a vocally powerful, energetic band.
Yeah. So Pitchfork gave it a 9.5, but let's get into our ratings. What do you, how do you feel about it?
So I'm giving it a 9. I had to look back at my Alice in Chains rating just to make sure I was on the same plane with it. And so I give it a 9. Like I said, it's just a couple little things that I would personally change, but overall I'm very pleased with it. I think this is an album that you can think a lot to, versus traditional Nirvana albums or just traditional Nirvana music where it's like you can lose yourself or you can like get a release out of it. But like this one is very much like get comfortable and watch them perform and watch how there's a part in the last track with Where Do You Sleep Last Night before Kurt belts out that last kind of those notes you were talking about. There's a moment where he takes a breath and like looks in the camera, and it's like very wide-eyed Kurt, which is like you're not going to see that often. You're not going to see him with a spotlight on him that often, right? I mean, Kurt's performed in wheelchairs and sunglasses, all crazy shit. Yeah. But it's very interesting and very beautiful in a sense. So it was very nice to take in. So 9 from me. Still under Pitchfork, but not bad.
I give it a 9 as well. I mean, it's fantastic, and I agree. I need to listen to more Unplugs, but out of the ones I've listened to, I think it's my favorite, and it's great. It's timeless. There's a lot of emotion. There's a lot of backstory, and I think it was a great send off as a quote unquote last album. And
Yeah.
obviously record labels are going to milk dead artists dry as much as they can and
Mhm.
continue to release whatever the fuck they want to. But this is really their send off, and I think it's great. And it's eerie to look back and watch the footage, but I think it's an important step in their career, and it's important for the history of Nirvana and Kurt as a whole to kind of see where they were at, and where they could have gone. And rest in peace to Kurt. I hate that he was struggling with what he was struggling with, but they say it's better to burn out than fade away, and you can take that one way or the other. But we got to get a lot of great music out of him, and he didn't kind of continue to produce shitty records that lost
Right.
its power over time. He put out what he wanted to, and they still hold true today. So I think it's great. All right, well, let's get into Rides or Dies. And
We got an interesting
if
Rise or Dies today.
If you haven't listened to Unplugged by Nirvana, please go listen to it. Anthony,
Yes.
answer your Rides or Dies, and I have some questions.
All right, good. I'm glad you got questions, because this Rides or Die is very purposeful, and I can't fully explain why it's purposeful yet, but in time things will be revealed to you, Blake. So, listeners, if you communicate with Blake on a regular and you hear the name of this track and artist and you recognize the context, keep it under wraps for at least another week. All right, but this track is called "Always Be My Baby" by Mariah Carey. This song fucking bangs, dude. So let me hear your thoughts on it. Give it to me now, and then we'll circle back in time.
Yeah, we will, because there are some underlying themes that Anthony and I have discussed that we'll have to reveal at a later date. But I think very poignant song for the times right now. It's a classic. Mariah Carey's got some hits, and everybody forgets that she has albums that are not Christmas albums. And
Oh yeah,
I think "Always Be My Baby" is just. We've all felt that, that love in your heart. Someone's always going to be your baby. And Mariah gets that, and her and Eminem had a little thing for a little bit. Maybe it's about him. We don't know, I could see it, but I think it's a timeless track. So Rides, very interesting, but definitely with the provided context, it's a Rides.
There you go. Yeah. I mean, this song also does like very, it's smooth. Like Mariah's fucking smooth in this track, and it's got a great backbeat to it. There's a moment within like the first 4 seconds, like the first bass pulse in this track really caught me off guard when I listened to it in my car or on a good sound system. It's like it's like boom.
Yeah.
Like it's very good. And I wish the rest of the track sonically carried that same bass like pulsation. But it's good. And like I said, there's very much an intention to this track that will in time make sense.
Yeah.
Probably next week it'll make sense.
Yeah. So my song is "Careless Whisper" by George Michael. So I want to tell you why this is my song, and I have to share my screen, and I'll probably, hopefully we don't get copyright struck for this, but I have to show you why this is my song. So people have been making these videos, but I just want to show you. Can you hear that?
Yeah. He's just doing donuts.
Yeah, around a police officer.
Yeah.
And then just skirts off into the night. And so there are several of these videos, right? It's of people just doing crazy shit in their car. So people have been sending me these videos. Me and my friends have been sending them back and forth. So the song is stuck in my head, which is why I picked it. So, I mean, it's a bop, it's a banger. So what did you think about it?
It's definitely a good song. Well, first off, tell the folks, if you just search "Careless Whisper" Drift on YouTube, you'll get infinite videos. It seems of people just fucking wilding out, and they're singing too. So I give them. Who's filming? I wonder. How are they doing that?
I think it's just cameras on their head or something, dude. I don't know.
Because they definitely have two hands on the wheel. But yeah, this song rides. It's not my favorite version of this song though.
Really?
When I was in high school, Seether. I listened to Seether a lot. this song is one of their, I think it's on Disclaimer 2. No, Finding Beauty in Negative Spaces. That album. They had this song on there, and it fucking crushes, and it's still in that same kind of vibe of like melodic saxophone, like vocal performance, but I enjoy it. And then that took me back to finding the original George Michael, which, like I said, not a bad track. I tried to remember too, like what I practically Google searched like Careless Whisper and then film. And do you know what film came up when I
No.
searched that? So Deadpool. Deadpool was like, and I think
Interesting.
that now I might be connecting the dots. Is there any like Deadpool scene where he's fucking driving and crazy shit are happening?
There probably is.
I bet that's it. I bet that's like the origin of those drift videos. It has to be. How does that shit go viral nowadays? Like, there's not enough people liking George Michael songs, I think, to
Yeah.
to like just do it once. Like
Yeah.
Rick Rolling in Always Sunny, listening to what is that song? Let's see. There's a Rick Rolling is a internet meme. Never Gonna Give You Up.
Yeah,
That's the song by
yeah.
Rick Astley. So I would assume they're probably similar from that movie. But yeah, solid track. I definitely chuckled when I saw it. I was like, all right, what's Blake got cooking up?
Yeah.
So,
All right, so let's get into the movie. You picked the movie Intro for the People.
So the movie is on Netflix. It's called Hollywood Rebel. It's a 40-minute documentary on Hans Zimmer, and it kind of highlights his process, which I had never been aware of. You know, all my life that I've heard of film composers, I've always thought of, you know, traditional like John Williams standing in front of like an orchestra, right? John Williams did Jurassic Park soundtrack and Indiana Jones and probably the big Harry Potter ones, the ones that you would probably for sure recognize. But Hans Zimmer's so interesting because he's like the producer. He's like Ableton aficionado back before Ableton became a thing, you know. So he was at the forefront of digital music, and I think that is so telling to his success because he's done like hundreds and hundreds of film scores, but he's able to see a film and get a director's vision and then tie the two together. I think Dune is a huge statement to that, right? Where like you can talk to a director and get a feel and then put it in musical format, but not taking away from the film, but in fact becoming a pivotal part of it. Film scores are something that are very attractive to me. So wanted to kind of bring this up, and then we could, you know, chat a little bit about maybe some scores that have, you know, left an impact on you or just your thoughts on Hans Zimmer.
Yeah, I thought it was really, really interesting, and like it was cool to learn about like his background and his upbringing. But it was cooler to me just to see his process, right? Being the first to kind of get involved with computers and electronics like that, and kind of being that guy to push that envelope forward. And obviously, so many classic Hans Zimmer, you know, scores. Dune obviously is huge, but also like, and look, I don't like Interstellar. I'm very public on the record with Interstellar, but the score of Interstellar is crazy. And when he puts, I just want to like, I want to get in his head, man. Like the shit that he thinks about and says and stuff. Like when he's talking about the stuff he's doing for the nature documentaries, and he's like, oh, you know, I want it to sound like wind, and he's fucking with this and
Cold
doing like
ice.
little, like shit like that. And the scene for that Joker moment in Dark Knight when he's like, oh, it's only going to be 2 notes, and it kind of rises to this crescendo. And I don't know, there's something going on in that guy's head, man. He's fucking crazy. Like
exactly,
it's crazy.
And like to have that forethought before you put your hands on anything, right? To say, all right, internally, I know exactly at least how I want this to go, or where I want this to start, or what I want this to sound like, and like then to be able to actualize it and put it out into the world. I mean, that is what musicians do, right? So like Hans Zimmer being a composer, being able to do that now with like infinite options right at your fingertips, I think is so it's so exceptional. But I agree, like his ability to verbalize things in a way makes so much sense, and I could listen to him talk about every film score he's ever done, probably.
You know,
the Lion King was like so fucking cool to me because I grew up, Lion King was like the first movie I ever saw in theaters, and I love it wholeheartedly, and it speaks so much and to me. But to hear how he came up with that intro song to The Lion
Yeah.
King, and it was completely against what like the studio was their vision was, but they realized like once they heard it, like there's no that is it, you know, like there's
Yeah.
no alterations that need to be made because like he captures it, right?
Yeah, and that scene was really cool because that song is so iconic. Like
Yeah.
everybody knows that song. You know, it's phenomenal. And I think like his just looking at him like during the process and him in that studio he has where it's like in the middle of his studio and there's couches and stuff and there's no windows, it's all just instruments and computers and shit. Like he's just a master at work, you know. It's really interesting to see his process. And he there are movies that, and look, he's done some shitty movies too. Like I think he did like the score for Man of Steel, which like why, but you know, he still like those moments where, especially in movies like Interstellar and Dunkirk, dude. Dunkirk is my favorite war movie. It's in my top 5 movies of all time. Like Dunkirk is phenomenal, and his score on that, it adds so much tension and such an element to it. And I think that, you know, him and Christopher Nolan, and I go back and forth on Christopher Nolan, but their relationship, I think, has really given them both a chance to kind of collaborate and shine in a very unique way, which I think is really cool. So I'm excited for the future of them. And obviously his relationship with Denis is interesting and really cool. And Denis telling him about Dune, basically being like, I want it to sound like it's not like it's from the future, you know, it's something weird from the future. And he nailed it. Like he does it perfectly. And
Right.
I think it's just really cool. Have you seen Dunkirk?
I don't believe I have. There was a time period where Dunkirk, I think Fury, and there was another. Dunkirk's not about the medic, is it?
No.
Okay, there's another war movie about a medic
There's Hacksaw Ridge, which is about, yeah.
I think that's it.
And
Andrew
then
Garfield.
1917 came out around the same time too.
Yeah,
which was
I
shot
wanna
all
say
as one
I've
shot.
seen 1917.
Yeah.
But I think I was just overwhelmed by war movies in that moment that I was like, I don't even know where to start. But no,
Yeah.
I don't believe I've seen. I'm not. It's not coming to mind. So, but I would be open to watching it again for sure.
Yeah.
So
definitely.
put that on your list at some point. But
for sure.
And then you know, I mean, other composers that come to mind too. Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. We talked about a little bit last week. They have some really interesting films, and like it's funny when you see directors who have their composers. Right. I mean, like they've done a lot of stuff with David Fincher.
Yeah.
You know, Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross has Hans Zimmer working with Nolan and Denis. I mean, it's you start to kind of find directors who have their kind of muses, whether it is composers or actors, and then it's just kind of like they go and create things. And I think that's such a cool relationship, and it just gets better over time. It feels like it gets better over time.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, so do you want to intro the album for next week?
All right. So next week we're going to go to Papadozio land. We're going to listen to their most recent album. It's called To Live a Making. It came out last year. I'm going to give you some context for this album, okay, Blake, so I don't have to drop it on you after you've listened to it. So I'm going to give it to you before. Okay. This can be found on their Bandcamp page. If you just go to their To Live a Making on Papadozio's Bandcamp, you'll get a more detailed description. But I'll just give you a little quote from Sam, one of the keyboard players. He says, "This album is a story about life, a timely commentary at a pivotal moment in human history that is dedicated to pondering prevailing mainstream cultural narratives. The music aims to inspire notions that life itself is creative, that love is real, and that together we could thrive if only we could tell ourselves the right stories and ask the right questions."
Interesting.
So, okay. Very introspective album, To Live a Making, coming next week. And then what are we going to be watching?
So I have a number of movies because I had an idea, and then I have Dunkirk in the back pocket. But I think what we're going to do is, so we have an aside after this episode where we're going to talk about all the Planet of the Apes trilogies movies, the newest ones. So we're going to do Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, which comes out in IMAX this weekend. So we'll watch that and talk about it. And then we're going to drop an aside at the same time as this episode where we talk about the trilogy. So go listen to that if you want to get prepped for the upcoming movie. But that's the movie.
I think they available on Hulu. Those
the
originals.
It bounces back and forth. I think Rise is on Hulu, And then I know Dawn and War are on Max. So I don't know if there's other ones on Hulu, but I watched Dawn and War on Max.
Gotcha. Excellent.
Nice.
So yeah, y'all got an aside coming of this new Planet of the Apes trilogy, and then next week we'll talk about the Kingdom.
Hell yeah.
Should be good.
All right, thanks for listening, everybody. Anthony, I'm just going to stop it and then restart it. We can talk Planet of the Apes, so don't go anywhere.
Okay.
All right, bye, everybody. Have fun.